Well, what does a northern gardener do when early June temperatures are in the 90s? And what is the trick to protecting your garden from grazing deer? Explore solutions and these other trials tonight with Great Gardening. We'll also celebrate some inspiring programs aimed at growing the next generation of growers and answer your phoned-in questions. So stay tuned.
Gardens are always a work in progress.
The earthworm is a sign that there's lots of life in your garden.
Google doesn't have all the answers, and the best way is to talk to fellow gardeners.
You know, in the spring it has a totally different look. I kind of like that it changes from month to month.
Well, welcome to Great Gardening. I'm your host, Karen Sunderman, and we are excited to share some real expert advice with you tonight and hope to inspire you to up your game. Now, our garden experts are Deb Erickson Burns. She's the head grower at a family greenhouse on the Iron Range. And Bob Olin is a horticulturalist and longtime educator, and we sure appreciate your being here tonight.
It's our pleasure. It's always fun.
It's nice and cool in the studio.
It's very true.
This is the time of year that air conditioning actually feels good. Now, if you have questions and you're dying to have them answered, please give us a call at 218-788-2844 or toll free at 877-307-8762. You can also email your questions to ask@wdse.org. Now, our telephone volunteers have generously donated their evening to help you get the information that you need. They are from the Master Gardeners Program in St. Louis County, and we thank them for collecting your questions and funneling in to the studio so we can answer them. Well, when we named this garden special, we had no idea that it truly would be a summer warm-up. It's called the Summer Warm-Up, and boy, did it ever.
It warmed up, didn't it?
Got hot.
It got hot, yes, indeed. And we can't really complain because it was freezing just a short time before that. Talk about extremes.
Yeah.
Some of the challenges for us in the Northland, but without challenges, it wouldn't be any fun, would it?
Well, I don't know.
You don't need those challenges.
I don't need those challenges. How cold was it out by you, Deb?
Well, it was 21 degrees. What, 10 days ago? Was it just 10 days
just
ago?
A short time ago.
Yeah.
Yes, just a little over
And
a
now
week.
it's 90s.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's extreme, yeah.
So what do you think the consequences are for plants, you know, putting them out in 90 degrees? I mean, they weren't ready for that yin and yang.
No, I've seen a lot of shock and a lot of heat stress and drought stress even. I mean, they both can come on with all the wind too, and so taking something that extreme from 21 and then bringing it up to 90 in such a short amount of time is really stressful on plants.
You know, Deb, a lot of people talk about hardening things off. You can bring them out of the greenhouse and you harden them. People put it in the shade or in the garage. You really need to expose them to some sun, bright sun, before you put them out in the field or in your garden. So the hardening process, while they're still in containers, I think is very important. If it's cold, you want to harden off against the cold. If it's warm, you really want to expose them to bright sunlight rather before you take them out of the pots.
Right, for a few hours every day, or an hour, starting with an hour and building from there.
Okay, guilty as charged. I took a plant from inside, put it in full sun, and it completely died. So watering is going to be key this year, I have a feeling. And Deb, you have some tricks. You brought us some video and showed us what we should be, how we should be watering. Let's take a look at that.
Water into the container and then water it thoroughly and really saturate it early in the morning. This is a morning shot. Then she turns down her hose to make sure she gets the water in it and not spraying around it. And then if the afternoon and things are looking hot, then she does a foliar, but that's what you would do just to cool down the foliage in the afternoon. And not too much water and not oversaturating the soil, because that can bring you far more problems than the heat does. You know, that overwatering will do more damage.
We talked about that using water almost like, you know, when you step out of the shower and you're still wet and you cool down kind of?
The foliar cool down and dropping down the basal temperature and then that evaporation and letting it cool down the basal leaf temp so that they are, I mean, they're not going to really absorb it, but it's definitely going to cool them down and help them get through the stressful part of the day.
Yeah, we really talk about watering thoroughly, so people should water thoroughly. Particularly, transplants, the root system isn't there. So you might have to come over the top, as you mentioned, particularly with like cool season crops, like the cabbage family that you put out as transplants. Water thoroughly once, but then come over the top. We call it syringing, actually, where you're going to actually get some evaporation, and that's really critical under these intensely warm temperatures. But always in the morning, and always make sure the foliage is dry before we come into the evening hours.
Okay. Deb, you want to show us this fancy? We asked you what your favorite tools were, and
Right.
this was on your list.
And this is my magic wand. So this is a rain wand, and it has a head that you can change. So if you have pest pressure, or if you want to just do a really light mist to smaller transplants, you can adjust it and or do a full shower. You can change the head to a full head if you like it. It's short, so it's not real heavy, and then the thumb is the best for controlling how much you're putting on things. And it's just a great wand, and you have a lot of control with it. And then this is another favorite tool of mine, and
Pro tools.
I love this one. Obviously, I use it a lot, but I use it to do weeding. Like if you stick it into a well-watered plant, and it just pulls out so easily. And my grandfather used to make sure his employees had a knife on them, and it's basically the same thing, but you can do so much more with it. You can do a trimming, and you can do cuttings with it, and just take your cutting off, and then stick it in the soil.
Wait,
It's
you
just,
should show us that cutting. Truly, that was just one
that
petal
was
of
it,
that?
right? So you just take it, knock it off, and put it in, and guess what you get in here's one that was stuck in there. Oops, sorry. Here's one that was stuck in there, and it just roots, just like that.
Wow.
And those are succulents, and this could be the year of succulents. Succulents
Might
and
be.
geraniums with all this heat that we're having. So that's what this works really well for. And then we also can do major jobs with it. Want to do this?
Should I stand
Yeah.
out of the way?
Yep.
Yeah.
And so then this, in my opinion, is overgrown. And so what I do with my tool is I just do a major haircut, cut it. Because if you're cutting, again, half the foliage, you're cutting half of its water needs. And so then you cut up all this extra, night skies, it's a beautiful petunia, but there's just too much of it. And then this is ribbon grass. And if there's too much of it and you don't like it, it's just like a weed. And then you just cut it out. And you give more space to the other things, because it can take over, ribbon grass can. And so then you just cut it out, clean it up, tidy it up, and then
You realize that I have my mouth open just wondering
it's
and marveling
just going
at
to be
this.
so much better, and it's going to be a much happier plant. And then for deadheading geraniums, take them all the way down. It won't hurt them if you snap off the top. It's just really ugly. Some people used to think they'd get disease. They don't get disease. But you just cut it down. And the great thing about this tool is it has springs for old hands, for arthritis. It just makes everything so much easier. And I think a lot of the geraniums are going to get shut down in the afternoons, and they're going to have more burn to them. So you could go in there and pick it out, but you could just take it off, because
Deb,
you're taking
thank
off
you.
the stress.
Thank you so much, because you just are way more brave.
I just have way more pots to do than most people do.
It
don't-
is
we
the
don't wanna-
right tool for the job.
It
and
is,
now
it
we
is.
have some expert advice for anyone who's ever dreamt of a garden terraced with elegant stone walls. Well, lean in for this next story. Taylor Legge has studied them and builds gorgeous and functional stone walls. He shared his approach with photojournalist AJ Larson. Take a look.
My name is Taylor Legge, and I'm a dry stone wall builder. What I'm doing here is rebuilding several retaining walls that have fallen over and needed some attention. So what dry stone walling or dry stone building is just building using stone without the use of mortar, hence dry. It relies strictly just on friction and gravity and proper placement to keep things together. But if you have to pick one, you go for structural stability versus the aesthetics. One thing you want to have for sure is good footwear. These happen to be something steel-toed. That way, just in case you happen to drop something on your foot, you're not going to have any injury. Even when it's warm, I like wearing long pants, something that has double material, especially on the knees and on the thighs where you're setting stones a lot. I do a lot of work with hammers and chisels and things like that too. And then you're going to want to wear safety glasses. You know, the first and most important is to put the length into the wall, meaning the long part of the stone goes into the wall. Second thing would be putting one stone over two or two over one, or crossing all the joints. So making sure that you're setting a stone over the space between the two below it. As you can see, there are some of these, occasionally a really long stone that goes all the way through it, which is really important. That's called a through stone, and you put those roughly halfway up just to really bind the wall and keep it firmly planted. Other than that too, you also kind of taper the wall as it gets taller, meaning it gets slightly less wide as you go up. And then the other thing you really want to do is just make sure you're building everything level. Even if you're building on a slope, it's easy to want to put the stones to follow the slope that you're on, but you really want everything to be horizontal and level. You know, a wall or anything like that is really only as good as its foundation. You want to think about using the largest ones at the bottom, and then you slowly are kind of using smaller ones as you go up. And then you're trying to use the second biggest ones generally on the top. So it's almost like you've got this sandwich where you've got, really big at the bottom, next biggest at the top, and then you're kind of slowly using smaller stones up in between. You know, something like that might be decent to start with. And then I'll keep filling in with big ones, and then I'll take small ones to kind of fill in all those little areas too. You use bigger stones on the front, and if you look inside the wall, there's much smaller ones that I'm using to fill all of the gaps in here too. That stuff again is traditionally referred to as harding. You really want to pack the inside of the wall tightly. You really want to individually place every one, make sure they don't move, and then you keep adding smaller ones until it's full. And that actually, more than anything, is what gives the wall its true strength. It can be a little bit tedious, but you really don't want to rush it. As far as time goes building into this, I've spent roughly, maybe 20 hours of building time so far on this side. But I think the benefits are, we get a lot of frost, we get a lot of heave here in Minnesota. Water freely drains through it. You don't get it trapped inside the wall where it can cause things to shift out of place. Renewable. I mean, something minor happens, something falls over, you can rebuild it.
So he talks about easily rebuilding it. Well, it may be easy for him,
Yeah.
So let's get to some questions. Though that was inspiring. But here's Tara in Willow River. The past 2 summers, the one large flower cluster on my strawberry hydrangea, they were big before, now they're small. What happened?
Well, it's really about growth, probably the previous season. That's when you're storing all the energy. So it could be water, it could be fertility, it could be sunlight, it could be any combination of that, like that.
That's not a good answer, Bob.
That's not a good answer. She wants to know exactly which of those things it is.
Yes.
Just push that plant along and get it to grow more this season is what she really wants to do.
And she might want to water a lot this season.
Might want to do
because
that.
if it's near foundation and if it's a dry area, it's going to be really dry this year.
And if you got light soils, the thing we got to mention, if you're watering a lot, you have to be conscious of the amount of nutrient. You're going to have to supply more nutrient because you can flush, particularly nitrogen, very easy to flush through your root zone.
Yeah, fertility is gone.
Fertility is important. I think slow release, nitrogens in particular, what we call water insoluble nitrogens, are valuable in a year like this with a lot of watering.
Yep.
Okay,
Lots
this
of
might be
photon.
related. Karen in Duluth, what is causing the large white spots on my plant leaves? Is it heat? Is it drought? Is it the way I water?
I'm pretty sure I know what that is because I've seen it all over this year. It's just, again, we talked about acclimating. It's taking transplants out that have not been acclimated to the heat. And a lot of this actually,
light.
it's light and it's mechanical damage where they're out and it's they're in the wind and it's hot, and this is actually tissues breaking down because, again, the plant doesn't have a root system to replace that, and that stem is not very flexible. So that's sunburn, mechanical damage, wind damage. And
Will it grow
that's
out of
what's
it?
occurring. It will,
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Okay,
It will.
cool. All right, good news, Karen. Kevin in Duluth, I have little green worms eating my rose. Ruh-roh. What do I do right now? Do I just pick them off, or do I spray them with something?
Go ahead.
Well, that depends on how you want to treat it, right? You
That's
could
right.
treat it with a systemic, and but then again, we worry about our pollinators. You could pick them off and start that way. You could use that wand and knock them off, but it's completely up to
them and what
to
your
them.
option is.
Yep,
Frankly, if you got one rose bush, just pick them off.
that's it.
Simplest thing, and
Yep.
you don't.
But if you've got a multitude of them, you might
you've
want to
got
be
many, then
more
you have to be a
aggressive
little
on
more
it.
aggressive.
Yes.
And I would stay, because of the pollinators, staying away from systemics, and they're out there, but stay away from those. Just a topical application. We can mention malathion morning or on a real cloudy day or a damp day when you don't run the risk of pollinators.
Okay.
And neem
okay.
oil too on that.
Neem oil as well, sure.
Okay,
But
I got
application
one more to
sometimes will
squeeze
do it.
in here before we get more video. I planted an autumn blaze maple May 7th, purchased at a local garden center. It's not leafed out yet. How long do I need to wait before I say, yeah, no, not happening?
Okay, so were the buds from, when did he plant
May
it?
7th.
May
Oh,
7th.
so, and it didn't
Yeah,
leaf out,
didn't
and
leaf
then
out.
we had that cold frost, because we had black on our ash, on our oaks, on everything. So did it take out the buds?
It's possible.
And then what is going to progress from there? Is it going to be able to have enough energy to produce more buds?
It was very warm, then we got that extreme cold, so if they did have the lower 20s, there could have been damage there. All you can do is wait,
That's it.
make sure it gets adequate water and see if it pops
Lots
buds
of
or
water.
not.
Yeah, boy,
Boy,
that
but
is
not
tough.
sure. I was worried about our ash, but they're coming out of it,
Yeah,
so.
we saw that in the forest a lot because they were growing, and then we got the cold temperatures. There was a lot of forest damage,
Yeah.
deciduous trees.
Yeah. And I heard people with apple blossoms got
No apples.
frosted off too. And somebody at your house too, I'm sorry to hear.
Yeah, my father planted when he knew, when he was told not to plant, and of course he did. And it all died, but then he just went to the local greenhouse and stole some more stuff.
So it's
Convenient for him.
It's so
you know?
convenient.
so it should be daughter knows best rather than father knows best.
Once, just
Once
once.
on one
just
occasion.
once.
Sorry,
So
Bob.
we are inspiring the next generation of growers, and it takes a village. In far west Duluth, the Farm to School program, the Gary New Duluth Recreation Center, and the YMCA have joined forces to get kids involved in feeding the community. Photojournalist AJ Larson captured a bit of the magic on a chilly planting day.
So as part of our continuing Why Get Outdoors programming, which is a collaboration between the Duluth Area YMCA, the Gary New Duluth Rec Center, and Stowe Elementary School, we are gardening today. This is the Gary New Duluth Rec Center gardens, and we are given 3 gardening beds that we get to use to do youth programming.
This space was put in 2018. It's part of an initiative with Farm to School. Research shows that when students are involved with growing their own food, they're more likely to eat and enjoy a lot more fruits and vegetables.
And so we are starting our gardens right now with the kids, and then our youth are going to keep the gardens going all summer, weeding and watering. And the food that's grown in the gardens is given away on Fridays for our food distribution. And so we're in a food desert out here in Gary New Duluth, and this is a way to get fresh produce to our neighbors.
We're planting corn and beans and also some squash as part of a Three Sisters garden that they'll be incorporating.
I think youth really need to know where their food is coming from. It gives them an opportunity to try things and see where things come from and ask those questions and learn how something starts so tiny as a seed and grows into so much bigger. For kids to be able to learn how to grow something and be sustainable and be able to grow this for their family is a really powerful thing.
I remember the first time that students were harvesting potatoes and didn't realize that they were grown underneath the ground.
We're teaching them depth of sow and how long it takes to grow some of the different types of seeds, what kind of vegetables grow in this climate. And so it's also an opportunity for us to work with the Farm to School coordinator, Renee Williamson, and partner with some of the professionals in Duluth that just have a passion for this.
That is such a great program, and it's fun to see kids with their hands in the dirt, legally, you know, encouraged to have their hands in the dirt. All right, we're going on to questions. Mary from Virginia. Bad news, army worms are here. Okay, how do you control them?
Well, again, and we're seeing it. We saw them in Cromwell. They're kind of marching into the area. They're technically, of course, forest tent caterpillar. They're associated with the aspen. So I think really you've got to protect areas like your garden area. And I think just a screen with poly with a little vegetable oil on it. So poly sheeting on a screen so they can't come up and over. The same thing you can do with your other trees. You want to keep them off your apple trees, your fruit trees, anything that you could defoliate. So again, a collar on the outside, and I think just straight poly. You might want to use a black poly so we don't get any heating behind it, and then just a vegetable oil on the outside. People use axle grease, it'll last a little longer, but it's a little messier. But just those kinds of barriers to keep them out of the vulnerable portions of your landscape.
This sounds like a fight.
Hopefully not. And, You know, we're overdue. I hate to say it,
Yeah.
but this cycle should have been with us quite a while ago, and it's kind of sorry to hear that it is creeping into the edges of our viewing area for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, oh bugger. Tracy in Hibbing, how do you get rid of Japanese knotweed? And she also wants to know the name of the grass in that planter.
So this is ribbon grass. That's easy.
Yeah.
Knotweed, not so easy.
So knotweed's not so easy, but you know, it is doable if you're not opposed to using glyphosate, which had a name brand of Roundup at one time. And fall application, cut it back and using a fall application, that's probably going to be your best bet. Digging it is very, very, very challenging, and knotweed can be very destructive around foundations and other things. So you kind of have to make a decision there how you want to control it. Fall of the year would be the best time to control it if you can use any kind of chemical control.
And one more, Sue in Carlton, wondering if there's an update on the white flies that attack raspberries. What do we do to control them, eliminate them? Shift them to someplace
SWD, the
else.
spotted winged Drosophila, right, which is such a big pest, and maybe particularly severe this year because of the heat again. The generation time gets faster and faster. And short of going to a massive spray program or exclusion netting, and those are the two things that are being done commercially, most people don't want to do either. So my advice would be this: pick every single 2 days and immediately refrigerate or freeze or process. Don't go 3 days. 2 days, refrigerate, process, freeze, and then pick up any of the fruit that may be on the ground, and it has to go into a clear plastic bag and solarize. You can't just put it outside the garden because you got the flies that are just going to come out. So the fruit that's on the ground, plastic bag in the sun, so it kills everything. Harvest every 2 days.
Wow, wow, wow. But raspberries are
They're
so good.
and they're so good.
They're so good.
And even if you get a little extra
netting.
protein, it's even better for you.
Well, if frozen, do we freeze them first? Okay.
right.
I knew that would go fast. And thank you very much. It is inspiring to hear from so many people who love gardening. And we'll be back with more questions and tips from Bob about protecting your crops from deer after we tour a lovely garden in Duluth. Hard work and ingenuity transformed the whole yard into a neighborhood treasure. Enjoy a sneak peek, and we'll see you back here after the break.
This is not scary. This is letting the plants do their job. For a lot of the plants here, we just let them decide where they're happy and try to nurture them that way. My name is Kimberly, and I am in the backyard of my mother's house in the Hunters Park neighborhood of Duluth. In 2014, when we purchased the house, the backyard here was pretty much all snow on the mountain, with a few suffering hydrangeas. So we decided we wanted to make most of the yard, so we went to work. We love it when the lupin are in full bloom, and the iris, and the forget-me-nots, and if there's a weed here and there, we try not to let it bug us. We just let it be. Most of our iris we pick up from friends. Actually, one very prolific variety came from central Minnesota, and I don't know its origins or its type, but it's a light peach dwarf iris that loves it in Duluth. And in fact, I've shared it with so many people that if you go around town, you will see it in other people's gardens. When my mother first moved in, this was, a regular yard. We gave it a little structure. And it really was 6 years of trial and error to get to this place. And I still feel like we're working trial and error to see what looks nice together, and also so that we have variety throughout the, from the early spring to the fall and even winter. I am not afraid to move things, and I've been accused of being a serial mover of plants. It was a dream of my mother's to have a climbing hydrangea up her chimney. And I know that they tend to be slow growers, and they can be a little bit picky. It turns out that this hydrangea loves the northern exposure. Gardening is many things for us. It's that sense of community and the wonder of watching it go from snow on the mountain to flowers that we've nurtured and loved and cared for, and now they're paying us back with their beauty.
Welcome back to Great Gardening. We hope this show inspires you and also that you appreciate the service provided to northern gardeners. From budding beginners to the masters, we work to support everybody at every stage of gardening. And Bob, you have been doing this and giving us the gift truly for 17 years. Thank you.
Don't remind us, but it's been a while and you're to be congratulated. You initiated the program and it's been very, very successful. Part of the reason is it's very localized, and these are problems that people have. And we're not even sure what's going to come in because it's all done live, but it's definitely on people's minds right now.
Yeah. Oh, and this is the season that we wait for, right?
Yes,
all winter.
absolutely. Just a great activity.
Yeah. Well, protecting our gardens and crops from hungry deer is a topic that comes up every year. So we asked Bob to show us a fence that really works. Let's take a look.
Yeah, I'm pleased today that Mark Peterson from Peterson's Berry Farm, just outside of Eveleth, has joined me today, because over the years he's dealt with the deer issue.
The deer love all the crops that I grow here. They love Juneberries, they love blueberries, they love strawberry leaves. I think that's probably their favorite. So it's pretty hard to grow anything that you have to get through the wintertime and not have to worry about deer coming over for a snack.
Ultimately, and we're showing you the best of the best here, this is a kind of a system that you want to get installed. You want permanent fencing, and I know people kid me all the time, Mark, about fencing, but it's the only permanent solution that I've found and less aggravating. You tell us some of the other systems you've tried from electric on out and why you elected to go to this and why you should have gone to it earlier.
Electric fence that I had a moose come through one time. The fence oftentimes will ground out, and it'd be a lot worse if you had to protect your crops during the wintertime when you got snow to contend with besides that.
For long-term permanent installations for perennial material, your apples, your blueberries, anything like that that deer are continually harvesting, something more permanent, particularly if you've got a large area to deal with. I think you want to look at fencing that's at least 8 feet in height. 8 feet is what we're dealing with as a minimum in height. Good structural pressure treated lumber poles that can be stapled in. We want them about 4 feet in the ground at least on what we call the line posts that are running down the line. Corners, we might want to go down a little deeper, about 6 feet if possible. So you're going to make a permanent installation. Takes a little bit more money, a little bit more effort, but it'll be with you a long, long time. It's really important if you're constructing this, you have solid corner posts, and we want to show you a corner installation.
This has been here for over 20 years, and you can see it's still plumb. Corner posts are what take all the tension out of here. You can see how this whole post is holding up this wire as we stretch it so that the post doesn't lean at all. There's these lateral posts that go across to hold it straight.
You have to control the deer and make the initial investment. I think you'll be glad you did for winter, hardy, woody crops. We really need a permanent fencing structure of some type.
That is a pretty fence, but it's not going to be for everybody.
Just because of the size and the effort and the expense perhaps, but it is the permanent solution for winter fencing, woody materials, because you got to do something. Now, for most folks, if you're going to look at your summer crops, whether it's vegetables or small fruits, you have a whole number of other options actually. And you can look more at some of the electric fencing. They do have to be babysat. You can't let those things ground out or you'll be surprised.
Let's take a look at you gave us some recommendations
We've
too.
got some recommendations, yes. And smaller areas, obviously he's got an acre or two fence there, so he needed at least an 8-foot fence. If you got smaller areas, maybe 10 by 10 or something, you could buy with 4-foot fence. They don't want something they're not certain they can jump into and get out of. So the smaller the area, the shorter the fence. That's true. You can always look at repellents, but you want to be extremely careful. We talked about labels. You can have a repellent, and there can certainly be odor and taste repellents. They're either typically dry-based or they're putrescent egg-based. Read that label, particularly with edibles, because it might say labeled for edibles, but if you read closer, it says you can put it on the plant, but not on the fruit or the edible portion. So you have to be extremely careful about anything that you're going to consume or you're going to eat. Rotate your repellents because they get used to these things as well. And then you've got some of these motion-activated sprinklers that work really quite well. They're quite effective. You got to run a little hose out there and takes away from your watering in a warm year like this, but they certainly do the job. It's the winter that becomes a challenge. And in the winter, obviously, you're not going to use sprinkler systems and other things. You're not going to really, your electric fencing may not work for you because of the snow load. So you got to go to a structure that's really strong, and you want to protect vulnerable materials. If you're not going to fence the whole yard, then you're going to fence your trees. You're going to fence your raspberries. You're going to get a structure in there that they can't get through. So build it right to begin with. And again, these are the apples, the raspberries, blueberries, your strawberries. It has to be really durable, 8 feet in height. And because they can get over that if you're running long lines, a good solid pole in the middle, good strong corners, and stretch that wire between the two.
Thank you, and thank you for introducing us to Mark. That was really cool.
Mark is great, and Mark's gone through a lot of fencing systems, and this is the one he wished he'd gone to long ago. Yes.
Well, ultimately, we're trying to harvest what we plant, right? Now, there is a food initiative designed by the Fond du Lac Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa, that's helping Ojibwe families and producers get the resources that they need to grow. It's pretty exciting, so take a look.
We are at Gitiganing, the place of the gardens. I work for the Bimaji Idiwin Ojibwe Garden Program. I'm a gardener, and I also coordinate the producer training program. They can grow food for their families, or they can, if they have some extra, they can also sell the produce that they grow.
This program actually is a vision I've had for over 30 years, trying to get Fond du Lac to start a food sovereignty program in the agricultural department so that we can be a lot more self-sufficient with food and also grow healthy organic food for our community. And this is something that the Anishinaabe people have been doing for millennia.
Overall, I enjoy gardening. I mean, it's a lot of work, and if people don't like hard labor, then this is probably not the way to go. But the payoff in the end of the year, when you're eating the food that you've grown throughout the summer, it is such a satisfying feeling.
Each plot you will see here, the families working together in the garden, growing their own food, getting ready for the season.
It's me, my wife, our children, and our grandchildren. We come out here and been planting since the program first started.
We're both older now. I hope when the time comes that either Jeff or I are here, our kids and our grandkids will carry this on so they can pass on that legacy to their children.
It's very important the connection with food, to know where your food comes from, where your food grows, and what is behind your food. Also to have the seeds and the connection with the soil, with our plant relatives, and just growing our own food is very important.
Judy Lundquist of Fort Wing, Wisconsin, shares a beautiful example of garden-style generosity. 3 years ago, she complimented a picture of this iris that someone had posted on Facebook, and a few weeks later, she found rhizomes from the very same plant on her doorstep. She's been delighted with them ever since. This hosta was also gifted to her and dubbed the hosta that took over Center City by her sister. Joe Mann had his eye out for color this spring. He captured these beautiful bleeding hearts outside the Douglas County Historical Society in Superior. And he found a well-established lilac growing behind Carpel's Manuscript Museum in Duluth. It is producing gorgeous pink blooms more than 7 decades after it was planted. Liz Donnelly in Duluth shares some shots from her incredible collection of peonies, all in bloom, from deep rose to coral, delicate pink to vivid magenta. These crinkly white petals are neatly protected under Japanese sun umbrellas to extend their season. Glenn Blazkowicz took these shots at the Duluth Rose Garden this spring, where the tulips somehow escaped grazing by the local deer herd. A pretty rhododendron caught his eye nearby. And finally, Michael Heim from Hayward sent in amazing images of his blue Himalayan poppies. The color is a showstopper, and he says the plants are winter hardy in the Northland. Well, please keep us in mind as the growing season unfolds. Email your pictures to greatgardening@wdse.org. We'll share them through our Instagram feed and here on TV. Thank you. It's been so fun to see what people are growing and what people are asking, and I learn something every time. Okay, Dolores in Barnum, hanging begonia is too full. Do I trim it back? What do I do?
That's an awesome question. So if it is a tuberous begonia or a Himalis begonia, other than a fibrous begonia, you can actually take those blossoms, and the closer they are to yellow, the more they taste like a lemon. And the closer you go to red, that the more earthy or muddy they taste. So if you want to take off some of that weight and take off some of that the flowers, that'll take off a lot of their water need also. And you can actually put it in your drinks, you can put it in your water, you can serve it on a plate, and it's really nice and citrusy and light. Whites and the yellows are. But definitely she can take off some of the weight, because they do get big and heavy, and especially with the wind, that wind can do a lot of damage to them.
Okay, how about Suzanne in Duluth? She's got a 2 or 3 year old maple. It's got red bumps on the leaves. What are they? What's happening?
Well, that's leaf gall, of course, caused by an insect. And it can be either an insect that's depositing the eggs, and the egg's in there and the larva emerges, or it can be just an injury. So it's really callus tissue. It's the leaf's reaction to that actual process of depositing the eggs, typically done by a fly. Nothing to worry about. You can't control an insecticide. Fly's gone already. So just live with it, doesn't damage the tree at all.
Okay, Steve in Duluth has an oak tree with some of the same kind of issues that are kind of round golf ball size.
Similar gall.
Gall, yeah. Some can get very large golf ball size.
Okay,
Yeah.
golly. Okay, this
Golly.
is a
That was
trick
good.
one. Rich in Superior, he planted all the veggies in mid-May and they didn't even germinate. When do you plant?
So he planted them in the ground.
He planted in the
apparently.
ground in mid-May. He replanted in June, like the 4th or 5th. When should you be
So he
planting?
reseeded again, right? Well, I mean, you'll have better luck if you seed indoors and then you get them to germinate. You have much more control, and then you transplant out. But even, Bob, you've said do, transplant and seed at the same time, so then if something gets the transplant, then at least the seed can germinate, and you're going to need to water all those anyway. And
Or vice versa. If the seed doesn't emerge, then the transplant. But
yeah.
it's a good question, because seeding and germination really requires adequate moisture, and it requires warmer temperatures. So it
Okay.
can take a long time to germinate, and it's got to stay moist that entire time. So you're almost better let the soils warm up, and then make sure you provide continuous water until the seed germinates.
And we have to leave it there. You guys, this is so fun. And I know that we get to be back in the fall, and we'll be checking in on everybody's great gardens, of course. And thank you guys.
Yeah, it was our pleasure. It went
Yeah.
fast.
Yeah. And yeah.
Thanks to all the people sending great questions.
Yes, and contributing. Now you can check out our YouTube channel and subscribe and get updates throughout the growing season. The tips are drawn from experts across the region. And from all of us here, thank you for watching and for supporting Great Gardening.